Good evening. You know, I always say the panel are good, and I do mean it. The panels we get on here are very, very good. Tonight's panel, they just look good from the off. It's a given. So we're talking business and finance, and we make it fun too. And you can join the conversation on Twitter at Drive with Rob. Look, you can text the three gentlemen we have with us. They're very good. They can handle anything you throw at them. You can text 81333. Start your text 3-star. Let me introduce to you Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager. He also speaks about money and describes himself as a bit of a media pundit. Good evening, Jonathan.
Hello, Roberto.
I am loving the goatee beard. Did you have that last time you came in?
I'm having a bit of fun with it. What I need now is a white cat, and I can join the James Bond crowd, can't I?
You're very good. Welcome back. Matt Gabber. Matt, good evening to you. Welcome to the programme. You're CEO and founder of AppBiz Britain, and you champion young entrepreneurs without degrees.
Yes, I do.
Right. We're going to find out more about your business and your background throughout the course of the programme. We welcome back Chris Bezic, founder and CEO at The Future Shapers. Chris, you're an author, speaker and a strategic advisor on innovation.
Apparently so.
Lovely. And your beard looks good too. And why is it everyone's got a beard at the moment?
Yeah, I think the odd one out.
This is just the result of a lazy weekend, and I'm not seeing clients till Thursday, so yeah.
Seeing how it works now. Right, a beard is the in thing, or a strange goatee thing that Jonathan's sporting. Look, you can give us a call on 08459 455 555. We'll talk about Spain's economy resurging. We'll talk about a survey coming out tomorrow morning that's talking about consumers confident about debt. Really? Seems people are much happier now with taking on new debt, should they be?
Across beds, hearts and bucks.
This is Roberto Perrone
on BBC Three Counties Radio.
So, Jonathan, Matt and Chris with us this evening in the text number, and you know the phone number too, and Twitter, Drive with Rob. Gentlemen, is the cost of car insurance really falling? Motor insurance premiums are falling according to the Association of British Insurers. The average price, they say, paid for private comprehensive motor insurance in the first 3 months of this year was £360, and they say that's 2% down on the figure for the last 3 months of 2014. And the ABI's General Insurance Manager, Rob Cummings, said drivers were continuing to benefit from a highly competitive motor insurance market. If you drive, you've got insurance. Is the cost really coming down, Chris Bezic?
Well, my premium reduces every year. So
every year?
Yeah.
But you shop around for that?
Well, head of all things to do with the household shops around, yeah.
Your good lady wife?
My good lady wife, yeah.
So you don't, hang on, you don't do the shopping that she does?
Well, for stuff like that, you know, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, it comes down every year. But yeah, you have to shop around. Yeah.
Matt Gabber. Does your car, because if you drive, then the cost of driving never seems to come down, but it seems
Absolutely.
the cost of car insurance is coming down, say the Association of British Insurers.
Well, if it's happening, I haven't noticed it. I think being a younger driver myself, I've only ever seen it go up.
You're saying Chris is old?
Well, no.
That's just a slight on. I mean, how can you say? Look at this face. It's a face for radio.
Baby
I know,
face.
but
I mean, my insurance is now. I mean, I think they've stayed pretty stable over the last couple of years, but certainly haven't seen any noticeable reductions. So I look forward to seeing that if it does ever happen.
Jonathan?
Well, can I just say it's an astonishing coincidence, because today I renewed my car insurance. I really did. So it's amazing that you should bring this subject up. It's about the same for me as it was last year, slightly cheaper than 2 years ago. If the Association of British Insurers are saying that it's coming down slightly, then it's coming down. Of course, the general rate of inflation in the cost of living is literally 0.0%. In other words, overall, the cost of living has not risen over the last year. And of course, car insurance is in the mix.
Does it bother? I mean, you renewed today.
I did.
Did you shop around?
I did, but I in fact went with the current insurer because the other few guys I spoke to were only there or thereabouts, and of course I'm comfortable with my current company.
See, I find I have to shop around every year, I don't want. I haven't got the time. I can't pass this. I can't palm this off to my wife. I do everything else, Chris. To be honest with you, I palm off everything else, but I can't do the car insurance. That's one she she throws straight back at me. And I just, I'd want to go to an insurance company and say, look, these are the vehicles, this is the insurance, give me the premium, keep it sort of more or less the same. But I tend to find you go with one and they give you a good price, and then 12 months down the line, they give you a renewal premium, and it's more, and you have to get back on the phone, back online, do it all over again, and I can't be bothered with it.
They're not a charity. They're in business to make profit. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to offer you a good competitive price, but not necessarily the best price, but they are not a charity. 10 years ago,
I'm a good customer.
10 years ago, you didn't have the internet that you could do this, whereas now you can, and that's one of the reasons why, relative to 10 years ago, the cost of insurance is way down.
Yeah, but every business knows, statistically, it's far cheaper to keep a customer than constantly having to renew them. Yeah, I don't see them fighting hard enough to keep us.
But it's all utilities, whether it's, I know my wife is always on the case of utilities and she's always shopping around. I wouldn't have the patience because she'll say, I've saved £15. Hang on, 15 quid is,
but if you do that over 4, 5, 6 different things, so gas, electric, car, motorbike, whatever you've got, it soon mounts up, but you have to shop around. And most of them don't do enough to keep an existing customer.
Matt, what's your take on this?
I think that, I personally, I do shop around every year, and I think one of the problems that I have is that when I do shop around, I find that invariably the quote that I do have is already one of the cheaper ones. I think my problem personally with insurance is that, okay, you don't have to drive, but it's a forced purchase, isn't it? Because you can't have a car if you don't have insurance. So there's room there for all the insurance companies to come together and say, okay, let's price fix. Do they do that? I don't know. But,
would you ever consider having one of those black boxes where you pay as you go?
That's a bit like Big Brother, isn't it? Really, I don't like the idea of it. I'm not saying I'm a dangerous driver or anything like that, or there's anything that to hide. I don't think that that's the issue. I think the idea of someone watching everything you're doing, it's a bit creepy, isn't it? It's,
the telemetry.
Yeah,
yeah. But I think if you look at that as a piece of technology, right? And if that the biggest issue is, and not in saying you're young as in starting out in driving, but the big issue is costs for young drivers and getting in a car. And if having one of the little GPS things reduces that premium, then great. The reality is everyone knows where they are anyway because they've all got a phone and the GPS is all so we're sort of being
hang on, they know where you are. They don't know how you've driven. On the odd proviso. I mean, yes, I think it's about 160 miles. And I have to be honest, there were certain stretches of country roads where I thought, just a little bit. Yeah. Obviously not, but just the wonderful British countryside and the glorious sunshine. Yeah. You couldn't do that if you had a little black box in the boot.
No, but that's the price you pay for being able to afford to be on the road as a young driver. So it's got to be a good thing.
Would you have a telemetry system in your car?
For the same reasons as Matt said, no. It's where insurance is going. Big Brother, they're looking at genetics for life assurance, see who's going to get this or that illness. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. I don't like it at all.
Okay. I've got a lot of questions coming in, and there was a question I'm going to ask you anyway. Listeners want to know what you think would happen to the economy after Thursday. We'll address that very shortly. Can I just, before that, and we'll find out more about your business and we'll go through Matt's business at Biz Britain as well. Is Spain's economy resurging? If you look at the figures coming through this weekend, Spain's economy grew twice as much as the Eurozone in the first quarter and 18 times faster than the US, although that probably doesn't say very much, while output increased at 3 times the UK's pace. Has Spain's troubled economy managed to shake off its slump, Jonathan?
No, it is certainly growing fast, but then again, anything which is practically dead, if you put 4,000 volts through it, it's going to bounce. And clearly the European Central Bank has been printing money like there's no tomorrow, handing it to governments which are bankrupt, and that of course gets things moving. But that's not necessarily permanent. On the contrary, Spain, like most of Europe and indeed many countries around the world, have deep endemic economic problems which do not get resolved simply by printing money. But yes, there's no doubt Spain is growing very well right now.
That doesn't affect us, does it? Because our economy is okay, apparently. They've got you two laughing, right?
In the short term.
Until Thursday.
Right.
Why, what's happening Thursday?
Yeah. A little matter of an election. So, Chris, I mean, is Spain's economy resurging? Are the other Spanish trying to getting back on their feet?
No, I think I think I'd echo what was just said. There's 2 things, and I looked at this today. exports have increased because of what's happened with the single currency, and low oil prices have meant that Spain are apparently a fairly substantial importer of energy. So low oil prices have allowed them to import energy more cost effectively than they have done in the past. It only needs one or both of those factors to change again, and they're back to square one. So they're benefiting from things that are happening in the world at the minute, and it only needs one of those things to change, and then they're in
and the
trouble.
price of oil has gone up 25% in the last 6 or 8 weeks.
There you go. So
just
that starts to shift, and they're back to square one again.
Matt.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, that if you print money, you're always going to have a short-term boost, aren't you? But I think they've got some other hurdles to face. They've got high unemployment, what's it, 24%. They've got elections coming up at the end of May. So
The youth unemployment is shocking.
Yeah. So it's like all these house of cards, isn't it? And it could very easily all come tumbling down if anything comes a cropper.
Just before we take some travel news, Jonathan, is it like that, a house of cards? I mean, does it take not very much for all of these economies to take a massive tumble?
Well, people say, when are the central banks, the European Bank, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve in America and so on, when are they going to raise interest rates? Well, I would assert to you they're never going to raise interest rates. Maybe they will to save face, but they'll come straight back down again. Why? Because any rise in interest rates, given the vast amount of debt that the world has, is just going to bring the whole thing down, as you say, like a pack of cards. So yes, the whole thing is very fragile, whatever has been happening relatively recently.
Okay, we'll take some travel news and we'll come back with tonight's panel: Jonathan Davis, Chris Beswick and Matt Gubber. The overwhelming question, I just didn't need to update the text, I know what it is. You all want to know, what does the panel think could happen after Thursday's election in terms of economics? We'll put it to the panel in the next few minutes.
Travel news for beds, cards and bugs.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Long delays of well over 2 hours on the clockwise M25. The queues start midway between the M11 and junction 28 for Brentwood. Then it's solid all the way around for 10 miles down to the River Thames to the QE2 bridge, where 2 lanes are still closed after problems with some debris falling off a toll booth onto a car earlier this morning. So worth avoiding if you can. I can see a lot of you using the M11 and the North Circular to avoid the queues on the M25. So do expect delays there as you head down from Chigwell towards Woodford and the North Circular. Stevenage Broadhall Way is still partly blocked. Trees fallen across the A602 at Shephall Way. Winding Hill at Much Haddam still shut after another tree fell over near New Barnes Lane. And at Kempston, Wolsey Road is shut after a serious fire at Chantry Road. If you're heading for Aylesbury tonight, there's roadworks on the Aston Clinton bypass. That's causing queues now. Slow as well on Wendover Road between Stoke Mandeville and Aylesbury because of roadworks. And more, BBC Three Counties Radio.
Thank you.
The next travel bulletin is in 15 minutes.
BBC Three Counties Radio. On this week's Best Of podcast,
Guys, you at home, this is great fun, and this is another fun phoning we can have.
download all the latest podcasts at bbc.co.uk/Three Counties Radio.
Honestly, this is such a sad story.
6 to 7 radio heaven.
When have you missed Michael Jackson?
The Ian Lee Best Of podcast.
She had to move that child from a school in England to a school in Zimbabwe.
I used to go out with a drummer, and that drum face was quite off-putting.
That is great.
That is brilliant.
bbc.co.uk/Three Counties Radio.
On FM, AM, online and digital radio.
This is Roberto Perrone.
On BBC Three Counties Radio.
Oh, Steve on the text, what a great question. We're all guilty of this. I'll come to this in a minute. Tonight's panel: Matt Gubber, Chris Beswick and Jonathan Davis. Jonathan is an economist and wealth manager. Matt is CEO and founder of AppBiz Britain, and Chris Beswick is founder and CEO at The Future Shapers. A lot of questions on this. Ben, thank you for this. Says, which of the parties do the panel think will offer the best way forward for UK business and the economy? There is a small matter of an election this Thursday, of course. Politicians have been campaigning for nearly 6 weeks. What will happen after Thursday? Matt Gubber.
I think, like with any election, there's a lot of hot air going around, isn't there? There's a lot of I'll do this and I'll do that, but very little actually changes for the masses of people. Personally, I don't tend to try and mix business and politics, but my personal view is that the Conservatives are perhaps more business focused. But yeah, I think that there'll be a very little amount of actual real change. To be honest,
so you don't think whatever the outcome will be, we may not even have an outcome on Thursday. It could be days or weeks, even.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, especially if we've got a hung parliament again, which is very, very likely, and got a fragile coalition there. That the ability of any party to push in any one direction is going to be minimal. So the likelihood of anything big happening, certainly in the next year, is pretty unlikely, I think.
Chris?
I have election fatigue. I'm just, I'm sort of sick of hearing about it, to be honest.
Do you know what? This weekend I've spoken to several politicians, senior politicians, former cabinet ministers, who have also got fatigue. It's gone on too long.
I think, it's turned into a game, and it's been somewhat farcical, the stuff that's happened, and I don't vote, right? So on one hand you could say, well, don't have an opinion if you don't vote, but my opinion is the best thing for us at the minute is, and I don't want to use Cameron's words, but we need to stick with the plan, and I know that's using his phrase, but I just think we need stability and less volatility at the minute.
Is that purely on the basis of economics?
Yeah,
of finance for the country.
Yeah, and we just it happens every time we get 5 years into a plan, and then it changes, and we're as a country we're stop-starting all the time. And unless someone can come in and say, here's a completely different way of running the country, which in essence is nothing more than a big company, until we have that, then both parties, whether it's Conservative or Labour,
all of them,
but the main ones that we're really considering when we talk about Thursday is they're both trying to do the same thing with the same pot of money.
But by the very nature of politics, it does work on a 5-year cycle. Not even that. I mean, the first 100 days are always absolutely critical. Then after that,
which is the same in business, right?
Yeah. But hang on, doesn't business tend to plan for longer than 5 years?
No, it doesn't. Because in business, there's a whole concept of a new CEO coming in, and as the whole philosophy around the first 100 days, that's where you make the impact. And the UK as a country is nothing more than an enormous company, but we don't run it like a company, and that's fundamentally the problem.
What if people listening? Hang on, this current plan we're on, you say carry on, but what if someone else has got a better plan?
Okay, where is it though? That's the point. we haven't seen it, have we? We've seen variations on a theme, so we've not seen anything that says actually. Clearly, if this was implemented, we're going to move forward. And everyone has their opinion because they historically back Labour or Conservative or whatever. But there's nothing that's evidentially going to completely turn around the country. So commercially, the best thing to do is just to carry on doing what we're doing.
Okay, Jonathan.
I'd like to pick up on something that Chris said there, which I couldn't agree more with. The first 100 days is so crucial. But your listeners might remember what happened recently to Tesco. They brought in a new chief executive, and within a few months, they've just announced the biggest loss in retailing history. And I'm not surprised, because the guy has decided to get rid of all the dross, all the loss-making enterprises, and it costs a lot of money to reorganise. And big change, big problems initially, but with a phenomenal future. And that's what this country needs. It needs someone to take the economy by the scruff of its neck, and there will be pain in such a situation for a couple of years, but then I would suggest we could have a generation of growth, as opposed to what we've had for the last 5 or 6 years is incomes not keeping pace with the costs of living, with earnings for 40% of the economy actually getting worse and worse. I mean, practically everyone, when you hear about big job gains, it's all on minimum wages these days.
Zero-hour contracts.
Zero-hour contract. Can you? I mean, how dreadful for people who actually have to arrive somewhere at 8 o'clock in the morning, and 2 minutes later they say, "Oh, we don't need you today." This is outrageous.
But some people might want those 0 hours.
Some people might, but most people don't. But they have to, because they've got no option. There aren't any other jobs. So, most of the politicians, they support high borrowings, they support high spending, they support high house prices, they support low earnings for most ordinary folk. Basically, if you're retired or in the public sector, you're going to do very well. If you're young or in the private sector, you're toast.
Well, can I ask you, because all the politicians are offering, they're offering to put money here, there and everywhere in the last 6 weeks. No one's really addressed the problem of the national debt, which is it's eye-watering. I mean,
exactly.
Should they have mentioned that, Matt?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's scary, isn't it? I mean, I'm one of the younger ones here, and I think even my kids and grandkids are going to still be paying it back if something isn't done about it. And it's kind of one of these things, it's spiralling out of control, isn't it? And when do we wake up and acknowledge that, something needs to be done?
Because, Chris, you said Great Britain is like a giant company. It is, in effect, but... Whether you're running a company, whether you're running a household, you know that if you've got a debt, you've got to bring it down. You can't keep adding to it.
Yeah, okay, but that debt has been reduced. The problem is
that's not true at all, Chris. I'm sorry, that is not true at all. It's doubled in the last 5 years.
Let me finish, and then we'll come back.
But relatively, in the grand scheme of things, that the plan has been to reduce that debt. The problem is that we all, we want a utopian solution where that debt just disappears, and the reality is that's just not going to happen. It's going to take an enormous amount of time to get rid of that. So,
well, if they continue doing what they've done for the last 5 years, whether it's Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, UKIP, Greens, you name it, they'll never get rid of it. And all they're talking about over the next 5 years is reducing the amount they're borrowing. They're not talking about reducing the debt. And Matt, and my children, and your children, Chris, you were saying how young your kids are. These are the ones who are going to find it more and more difficult. Why? Because even if our interest rates never rise again, the fact that they're borrowing every single year means that the interest payment on the debt rises, which means that there have to be cuts year after year after year going forward. There is no alternative. And no, it's not going to take a long time to get rid of it. They'll never get rid of it.
Can't they borrow more? I think
they are borrowing. They're borrowing £100 billion a year.
Yeah, a bit more. Once you get to the... Look, you know what it's like? When your credit card, when you've done £1,000, you might as well, look, I'll take it up to £5,000. It makes no difference.
And already, to put it into perspective, our illustrious government is spending £50 billion a year just on interest. What does that mean in real terms? I'll tell you what that means. That means 100 NHS trust hospitals every year just to pay the interest. And if they keep on borrowing, then I'll tell you what, that's the public sector, that's the welfare state done away with, because that's where we're heading for, unless someone takes the economy by the scruff of the neck and stands up and says, enough's enough. Our children and our grandchildren must no longer pay for us to have a reasonably okay life.
All right. We'll come back to the stories. Max, you're new to the panel tonight. CEO and founder of Biz Britain. What is it you do?
So Biz Britain, we effectively help people to start up new businesses. So we're a delivery partner for the government's startup loan scheme, which is an initiative, government initiative, which makes capital available to new startups at a very low rate of interest, 3% above RPI, to help anyone who's starting a business or has started a business within the last 2 years to access a loan to get off the ground.
And what sort of businesses?
So it can be anything. There's no restrictions really. We get such a wide variety of different people, different ideas. We get everything from tech to hairdressers to builders to electricians. It's really anything. And the idea behind it is to drive some growth and to create some new businesses.
We have a lot of people who join us on the panel who are involved in a similar sort of scheme to try and help people form businesses. Do people that come to you, do they have a firm understanding of the realities of running a business?
That's the golden question, isn't it? I don't think there's any one-size-fits-all person that comes to us. We get quite a broad spectrum, and our job really is to assess where that person is, whether they're ready, whether they're kind of ready, or whether they're nowhere near ready, and then to kind of guide them in the right direction. So if someone's nowhere near ready, we have to say to them, you need to give us a bit more thought, and we give them some advice on where they can go to get the help they need and the training. If they're kind of ready, they need a little bit of support, we can do that with them. We can send them on a training course.
And do you it's like the business version of Britain's Got Talent. Yeah. When someone comes to you and they've got a really rubbish idea, do you tell them, look,
it's kind of it's a big Red Cross.
This isn't going to work.
It's never a you're a dreamer. but this isn't going to work. You need to really think about what you're doing and why you're doing it, because at the end of the day, it's in no one's interest to loan out money to a business or to a person that's never going to be able to repay that. It's not helping them, it's not helping us, it's not helping.
I have met people who've started very successful businesses. I've met people who come along and say their idea of starting a business, they're going to rent an office, get the latest computer, lease a vehicle, and look good.
There's a dream, isn't there?
And I say, when do you send out your first invoice? And they look at you blank thinking, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the biggest challenge we come across. You have people that come in when they present us with their business plans. You have £1,000 for an Armani suit, and you say, why do you need that? So I look smart in my business meetings. And sometimes you need to shake people a bit and kind of wake them up to reality of what they're doing. And I think the biggest problem is that people massively overestimate how much money they're going to make in the early days and underestimate the costs. I think a lot of the time you need to just half the revenue and double the costs in your cash flow, and you're kind of closer to the ballpark of where you're going to be.
We'll take some travel news and headlines. Come back with our panel tonight. Jonathan, Matt, and Chris, and Steve. Your question is very good. I can tell you now, Steve, and I'll reveal his question very shortly. Well, I'm a creative person, but you three men of business, you're all guilty of this. I'll give you the question in the next 2 minutes.
Travel news for beds, cards and bugs.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Still very windy. Just check the current weather for pilots at Luton Airport. It's around 30 to 40 mile an hour gusts there. M25 clockwise, very long delays. The queues start just before the Brentwood exit, the A12 at junction 28. Then it's solid for 7 miles all the way down to the River Thames to the QE2 bridge, where 2 lanes are still shut for emergency repairs. Lots of you trying to avoid that by using the M11 and the North Circular, so they're looking extra busy this evening. Elsewhere, Stevenage, a Broadhall Way, that's the A602, still partly blocked both ways after a tree fell across the road near to Shephall Way. Much Haddam, Winding Hill is shut, another tree across the road there at New Barnes Lane. Wolseley Road at Kempston is still closed after a fire at a building near to Chantry Road. You're queuing into Aylesbury tonight. The roadworks on the Aston Clinton bypass causing those queues, and delays on Wendover Road, the A413, that's queuing between Stoke Mandeville and Aylesbury, also due to roadworks. Adam Moore, BBC Three Counties Radio.
Across beds, hearts and bugs.
This is BBC Three Counties Radio.
It's 6:30. I'm Jane Killick. An independent candidate in this year's local central Bedfordshire elections says he's been begged not to stand by a sitting councillor. Ken Lynch, who's seeking election for Sandy, was emailed by Lib Dem Nigel Aldis saying Mr Lynch threatened his chances and would find the job difficult because of his age. A 15-year-old boy from Luton has been charged with stabbing a man in the back in Dunstable. The man was taken to hospital after being seriously injured in Victoria Street yesterday lunchtime. A man from High Wycombe has died after 2 cars were in collision with a flatbed lorry. The 32-year-old was a passenger in a Volkswagen Golf that was involved in the crash in Plomer Green Lane in High Wycombe early yesterday morning. The Queen has met her youngest great-grandchild, Princess Charlotte. It was the first time she had seen the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's daughter since the baby was born on Saturday. The weather for beds, hearts and bucks: occasional blustery showers tonight, some bright or sunny intervals tomorrow. And get the latest news and sport online at bbc.co.uk/Three Counties.
Thank you, Jane.
On FM, AM, online and digital radio.
This is BBC Three Counties Radio.
Evening, business and finance. Jonathan Davis, Matt Gubber and Chris Beswick. They're all three gentlemen of the world of business. And Steve says, Rob, I work in one of the largest offices in Luton. I'm one of a handful of men who still wear a tie in the office. Should the tie make a comeback? Let's put the first question first, if I can, to a very relaxed Jonathan Davis.
Certainly not. I practically never wear a tie. I've been on TV recently many times. I don't even wear a tie there, although the people say you should, blah, blah, blah. No, in fact, I would outlaw them at weddings, at funerals. I would get rid of a tie. I just don't see the point.
Hang on. You are Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager.
Guilty as charged.
Right, okay. Now, you deal with some high net worth individuals.
Yes.
When you go and see them about their high net worth individuality, you've got to wear a tie then.
When they come and see me, even for the first time we meet, I don't wear a tie. Next question.
Seriously? You don't wear a tie even the first meeting?
They have to take me as they find me. If they think wearing a tie makes me a better person at my job, then, well, I don't really want to work with them.
But is that when you put on a suit, a sharp?
Oh, I put on a suit.
Yeah,
but I don't put on a tie.
Well, why not? Just a little nice tie. Just
because it's not me. I would suggest to you, I probably look reasonably professional with just a suit and a shirt on. I do have shoes as well, but no. In fact, I was just today. I was watching a high-powered presentation on YouTube, and a very senior person in the business community was talking to 500 people of the captains of industry. He wasn't wearing a tie. I thought, good on you, sir.
See, Richard Branson gets away with it because we know all about it. But surely, if you're a captain of industry, Matt, you're going to need to. There must be time. You're not wearing a tie today.
I'm not today, no.
But there must be a time when you have to think. Right, I've got to brush up, suit and tie, and off I go.
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie. There are occasions when I do wear a tie. I think it depends on your industry. I think there's certain industries like finance and banking, and where you're expected to have that look and wear a sharp suit and a tie. I think the most important thing for entrepreneurs and for a lot of people is that you just wear what you're comfortable. You wear what you're comfortable wearing, what makes you feel confident in what you do. I have no problem with ties. I occasionally like to don a nice sharp tie with a suit. It's one of those things. It's a personal taste, isn't it? But I have no problem with.
Don't you think sharper when you're wearing a tie?
Yeah, I think.
No.
Well, no, you don't think so? I think it.
Hang on, the captain of innovation.
I read some research today, right, that has shown that the whole suit and tie thing makes you less creative.
I can relate to that because you're conforming to what you think people expect of you, whereas if you're just yourself, then you have the chance of performing more appropriately for who you are, and people will pick up on that.
But what if yourself is wearing a tie?
Then that's fine, but that's
them.
That's not you being asked to conform, is it? By having a corporate uniform policy, whatever.
That's kind of where I was coming from. Really. I think it's about dressing in what you feel confident wearing, what you feel comfortable wearing.
But I think your point was relevant, that you referenced the banking industry and there still being the preconceived, bankers, finance people must wear ties and suits. That's exactly why the banking and financial services industry is in such a pickle.
So we're going to help the politicians out here before Thursday. So the whole financial collapse was caused by people wearing ties.
Absolutely.
The tie was the problem.
Yes, and look at what all the politicians do. They even wear colour-coded ties. It's appalling.
Do you know, because I've been hosting several hustings and political events, and indeed the microphones in the studio are in a way colour. I've got the red one, Jonathan Green.
Oh no! Look at my colour.
It's just because it's linked. It's linked to the microphones when I open the microphone. But when we have an outside broadcast and there are microphones, if there are 5 microphones and they're different colours, so whoever's operating can pick out the colour.
Yeah.
The politicians instinctively go to the microphone of their party's colour.
Well.
And they if someone else has taken it, they get no. I want the yellow one. I want the blue one. They are instinctively drawn to it.
And of course, the politicians are the most conformist that there are.
Yeah. And to give you a little sort of quote or phrase or whatever, that conforming to that tradition and that history just doesn't serve us today, and it won't serve us in the future. And to Jonathan's point, we need a radical, not to use an innovation term, but we need a complete change of direction. The problem is we haven't got anyone that's offering us one at the minute.
But moving on from the tie story, you say conformist politicians. When they're campaigning, Mr. Cameron has been taking his tie off, rolling up his shirt sleeves, and that's counted on. Mr. Miliband hasn't. For example, things at the Cenotaph in November, they don't wear coats. They try to resist wearing coats because politically it's seen as a sign of weakness. They might be freezing cold,
right?
But they try not to because they're conforming to this image.
Yeah.
You're saying they can ditch that?
Well, I think this is our perspective as 3 people on the panel. I don't think it serves them. It doesn't serve any purpose anymore.
Because doesn't it always look really weird when a politician wears casual clothes? You look at them and you think, that's not right.
That's wrong.
There's no doubt that in a visual world in which we're in, visual marketing, subliminal marketing, the politicians have to do a Kennedy thing. They've got to look good on TV. it doesn't sit well with me at all, but that's the world in which we currently live in.
Okay. Ken says, or he asks, the panel say running Britain is like running a company, so how can a company give its money away at the same time as borrowing? Ken is talking about foreign aid. Would a company do this and survive? Comes down to ethical practices. A company's perhaps borrowing, it's trading. Would a company get involved in charitable causes, if we put it down to its basic level? Ken, thank you for the question. Matt?
Well, lots of companies do, don't they? You know, I suppose you've got to question the motive sometimes, whether it's for tax reasons or for public image. But, you know, you've got CSR budgets, corporate social responsibility, you've got charitable giving. There's lots of big companies are involved in charity. So I think it's wrong to say that companies aren't involved in don't give their money away, because they do.
Well, they do, but what they don't do is give it away when they're massively in hock.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference. And the auditors, indeed the police, wouldn't allow it. But we have an electorate which doesn't want to face up to the realities that's facing our futures.
I mean, I think, you know, Ken, who sent that message in, is picked up on the phrase or the point that I made, that running the country is in essence, you know, the country is in essence one big company. But what I also said was, it's not run like a company, and that's fundamentally the problem, and that's why we have them giving money away when actually we can't really afford it.
Okay. Ken, thank you for the questions. Coming up to 21 minutes to 7 o'clock. Chris, describe your business, the Future Shapers.
Okay, well, we in essence are an innovation company, hence the paraphrase around shaping the future. So we basically help corporates, big companies, CEOs and senior teams understand innovation, understand how to innovate, how to drive their organisations forward in the future through innovation. It's a massively used term. We see it every day on marketing material, on brochures, on company websites. You would be shocked at the low level of understanding around innovation corporately. So that, you know, the big companies that you think that we all perceive as being innovative and who talk about innovation, the actual innovation that goes on behind the scenes is very low.
Is that because of the size?
Nothing to do with size. It's about an understanding of how to do it at size, but it's not. The size isn't a barrier.
Okay. Jonathan, you're economist and wealth manager, TV star as well. What have you been on recently? I've heard you're all sorts of radio stations.
Another BBC regional channel recently. Yeah.
I'll have to YouTube you. Economist and wealth manager, you only deal with people who've got money already.
Yeah.
It's a shame. You don't take on a new client who hasn't got any money. Can you make a client money who's got no money?
I can give pointers, but I can't assist formally.
Thanks for that. That wasn't what I was looking for. So what if HSBC pulls out of the city? The biggest bank in Britain, HSBC, says it could decide by the end of this year whether to move its headquarters to Hong Kong. The company says it faces increasing costs from regulation and taxes in the UK, and many of its shareholders are encouraging it to relocate. By the way, the bank's profits increased by 4% in the first 3 months of this year to £4.7 billion. Jonathan?
Well, it's a bit like a unicorn. I'll believe it when I see it. Because every couple of years we hear these stories that this bank or that bank is going to go to Switzerland, or in this case to the Far East. But they don't do it. And why don't they do it? Because London is not nearly as regulated as these guys suggest. Yes, they're fined heavily, but they'll be fined heavily wherever they go. And they've got the West End for their shopping and their theatre and their arts. These guys love London, they love Britain, they love being on this part of the European continent. As I say, if it happens, good luck to them. If they think they can do better business somewhere else, fine, let them go and do so. That this country runs basically on lending and buying and selling houses, compared to Germany, which runs by actually making things that we want to buy and export, or in our case import. Well, you know, I'd rather
we export. I mean, the Germans are very good at making cars. They were, because we Jaguar Land Rover, not a British-owned company, of course, but look at the quality there and things like Aston Martin.
Do you know what? The most important thing you said there was not a British company, of course. Mini, not a British company. Honda, Nissan, you name it. None of these are British companies. Yes, they're exporting, but they're not really designing the things here, building the engines. They're putting them together. Germany is where it's at, and that's what we should be copying, not Wall Street.
Chris.
Well, we're seeing a lot of work in terms of innovation in the financial sector and the banking sector, and we're having some fairly high level conversations about strategy. Obviously, all our stuff's around innovation in the future. So, the strategies of long-term strategies of some of the banks may see a move. It all depends on the direction of the banks and where they see the future of their business. Is it also driven by higher dividends to shareholders?
Is it an empty threat? Is it saying, look, whatever happens after Thursday, if we don't get what we want, basically what they're saying is, if we don't get what we want, we'll pull out.
No, I think at the end of the day, they're just probably. I would imagine they're using something that they're probably considering already. They're just being able to utilise something.
Okay. Tony, Matt.
My uncle. No, I can't tell the future, but I think that if they were to pull out, that it would be a big loss for us in terms of jobs and money. I think for me, it highlights one of the problems with the meddling and the fact that profit has kind of become seen as a bit of a dirty word by a lot of people, and that this insistence on having to tax highly the rich and corporations. Okay, yeah, of course, they need to be paying tax fairly, but there comes a point where people need to understand that these corporations are creating jobs and they are creating wealth in the economy, and
See, politically, the idea is how much have they made in the first 3 months of this year? £4.7 billion, and any politician would think, do you know what, I want a slice of that, right? But again, if you're running HSBC, you've got shareholders, you're thinking, hang on a minute, no, I'm in a bit, because people sometimes forget business is there to make money.
Exactly, and people shouldn't be ashamed of that. And making money is a good thing, because when people have money, they can spend money, and it drives activity in the economy. It grows the economy, doesn't it? And it creates jobs. So we need to stop thinking about profit as a bad thing.
We'll take them travel news. I've got to be honest, I have saved the best questions for the last 15 minutes. There's one here about HR. I'm not even sure you three can handle this one.
Travel news for beds, cards and bugs.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Slightly better news about the M25 now. The clockwise side at the QE2 bridge, all lanes are back open after those emergency repairs that have taken most of the late morning and early afternoon. Very long queues, so still queuing all the way back past Brentwood at junction 28 to around 7 miles of queues, with delays of around 2 hours. That's going to take a while to clear. Got problems now if you're heading up from Borehamwood towards the M25 on the A1. There's been a multi-car accident blocking 2 of the 3 lanes between the Holiday Inn exit and the M25. Looks like we've got another accident possibly on the A414, certainly queuing as you head away from Hatfield junction 3 towards Coney Heath. Queues back onto the main carriageway of the A1M as well. At Stevenage, Broad Hill Way, the A602 still partly blocked to trees fallen across Broad Hill Way. That's the reason for the queues there near to Shepwell Way. And at Kempston, Wolsey Road still shut after a fire at a house near to Chantry Road. Adam Moore, BBC Three Counties Radio.
The next travel bulletin is in 15 minutes.
BBC Three Counties Radio. Nick Coffer on BBC Three Counties Radio.
Every day it's not just about great music and great conversation.
I'll get a bit technical here.
It's about local experts helping you across beds, hearts and bucks.
So what we're talking about then is capital gains tax potentially on the portion of the property that they directly own.
On finance, relationships.
But look at the way that you have contributed to this situation.
Health.
When you have a cough, which can seem quite innocuous in this way, but just irritating, asthma is something that we would think of.
Your pets.
Particularly if your dog is a Border Collie cross, it will be epilepsy.
And even law.
You still cannot say, Judge, you have to stick to this, but the judge's approach now is going to be, well, why shouldn't we?
Local advice for local people.
Nick Coffer, weekdays from 12 on BBC Three Counties Radio. Across beds, hearts and bucks.
This is Roberto Perrone.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Evening. Matt, where can people find out more about you and your business?
Well, they can tweet me. They can tweet us at BizBritain, or they can tweet me directly at Matt Gubber. They can go on our website, bizbritain.org. So that's B-I-Z, Britain, all one word, .org. Or they can look on Facebook. Basically any of the main social media channels. If they type in BizBritain into Google, they'll be able to find us.
Okay, Chris.
Similar, really. All the usual social media stuff. They can get me at Chris Beswick on Twitter. So Chris without an H. They can check us out on the website. So CEOs or MDs needing to look at innovation, they can go online and look at thefutureshapers.com.
Jonathan.
Our website is jonathandaviswm.com. WM stands for Wealth Manager.
Shall I now start playing TV bingo with you when you're on TV and spot you?
I'd rather you didn't.
There is one politician I always look out for. I've got a little bingo card, and there's another very famous gentleman from the Three Counties, always on television a lot. I play sort of TV bingo with him. I'm going to start playing with you as well.
Is he a property man, by any chance?
Could well be.
Could that be the chap you're talking about?
I always tick the box when he's on TV. Tick. We were talking about Hoddesdon earlier on this afternoon. I know it's your.
It's my hometown.
It is indeed. Right. Business leaders in Hoddesdon are in the early stages of preparing an application to enter the Great British High Street competition. Now, the town entered the government competition last year in the category of Best Market Town, but was defeated. They were defeated by Derbyshire's Belper. What can Hoddesdon do? There's been a lot of change in the town of Hoddesdon. I mean, they got rid of the Tower Centre, thank goodness. There's been a lot of development. What could they do in the high street? You're never going to draw the big shops there, but what can they do to draw in people back into the high street?
Well, I am not a retailer, and I know they've had a number of initiatives in recent years. They've created more parking spaces, free for up for an hour, that sort of thing. But Hoddesdon High Street at the minute is like practically every other high street you can see. It's full of estate agents. It's full of charity shops. And why is it full of charity shops? Because the owners of the properties can't get businesses to let them at the prices they're asking. The cost of rents, the cost of property is simply too high. There has been far too much of a focus from governments for the last 25 years to push the price of property up. Governments need to get away from property. That will bring the cost of property down.
Is it the government that pushes the price of property up, or the market?
I can assure you, if the market was allowed to do its thing in property would be a half of what it is today.
Okay, but we've still got. I mean, I live in Hitchin, and even a really nice affluent sort of area, really nice town centre, old market town. Hitchin has still got dozens of empty properties. Right now, those are privately owned by landlords. And one thing from a business point of view that I will never ever ever understand is the price of rent for local entrepreneurs or people that want to start a business in retail. Literally just cannot afford to pay the rent.
Exactly.
But the point is, the landlords don't seem willing to reduce the rent. They would rather these places sit empty, gathering dust, rather than reduce the rent a little bit. I mean, it just doesn't make economic sense.
The reason why they do that is particularly if they're owned by large institutions. The moment they reduce the rent that they're asking for, they have to reduce the value of the property in their balance sheet.
Right.
And that could really decimate their balance sheet and therefore decimate their business model.
Well,
so even though they've got empty properties, they can't reduce the rent. How ridiculous is that?
Yeah, it is. It's crazy.
Yeah, we're seeing it in Marlow as well. Marlow High Street. There's swaths of empty shops. Small local businesses that have been there for years. Tobacconists, florists, fishmongers. They're just gone now. It's a strip of.
But that's also down to there's been this rise in the supermarket, but they've done everything. They've become florists and butchers and candlestick makers. They're now pulling out. They're sort of withdrawing. I mean, would there be an opportunity? Because traditionally, if people took retirement money or redundancy money, they opened up a cafe or a florist, and they did something. I mean, that has been taken away. Will that return, do you think?
I can't see that it will, to be honest. No, I mean the prices of rent, particularly in high streets like Marlow, they're just going. I mean, I know of a business that's been there for 20, 30 years. It's a local sports shop that had booming trade, and their rents were put up by 60% last year, and after 25 years of trading, they're gone. So
that barrier, what we were just talking about, that barrier to entry, certainly for anyone even wanting to start in retail, it's just too high.
Tomorrow, by the way, is the anniversary. In 1626, Manhattan Island was purchased from local Indians by a Dutch settler called Peter Minuit for trinkets worth about $25. Great deal for him. Very bad deal for the Indians. $25. Goodness me. Gentlemen, would you ever invest in a friend's business? Motor racing champion Carl Fogarty, or Fogarty to his fans, is the most successful superbike racer ever. MBE, I mean, he's won celebrity, but he has done everything, and yet somehow he can walk down the street unrecognised. He's only 49, lives in Blackburn with his wife Michaela and 2 children, and he's been asked by a national newspaper about his worst ever investment. Listen to the answer. He said, about 18 years ago, I invested £100,000 in a friend's manufacturing company. It was a gamble, and my financial advisor told me it was a big risk, but I didn't listen to him, and the company went bust. Jonathan, would you ever invest in a friend's business?
I doubt I would, but that's because I'm not capable of assessing an individual business like that. I can assess economies and interest rates and investment markets, but no, not individual businesses. So no, I wouldn't personally.
Has anyone ever come to you like, I've got this fantastic business idea, what I haven't got is the capital to make it work?
I get emails all the time like that, and I delete them because there's nothing I can do with them.
Okay. Matt?
No, I think for me it's a big no-no. I think the whole don't mix business and pleasure, and don't mix business and your personal life.
But it's a really good idea.
But the thing is, though, I think I have a rule, and I think if you value the relationship with that person, I would never borrow from or lend to that person, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a great business idea. There's always going to be potential for that to go wrong, and is it worth losing that relationship over lending someone money? I've seen it happen. I'm not going to shout people's names around, but I've seen even within my own extended family, people lending each other money for business purposes, something going wrong, the money not being paid back, and it creates huge problems. And for me, it's just not worth it.
Chris?
I think that one of the big issues is that people don't get involved enough. If it's a few £1,000 you can afford, and if you can afford it, then the risk is obviously a lot less. When you start getting into lending, whether it's friends or not, £100,000 of anyone's money, you really need to be. You've got to be involved. I don't mean hands-on, but you've got to regularly attend meetings. You've got to have regular updates. You've got to be looking at the figures, at the P&L every month. You've got to have regular management accounts. You've got to really keep an eye on investment. And I don't know what happened to Carl Fogarty, but I would guess that his situation is fairly typical of a lot of people that lend money to friends. Because of that friendship, they don't treat it as a proper business sort of
interaction. So whatever, even though your friend, and some people argue that Carl Fogarty, he's got probably more money. He won't miss £100,000.
Well,
but it's £100,000.
It's £100,000. And the reality is, like we were talking about, the legacy that that the national debt's going to leave. That's £100,000 of his children's inheritance. So it's a lot of money for anyone, regardless of whether you're a millionaire or not. But the problem is, you have to take the relationship out of it, and you've got to treat it fairly cold as a business decision. And when people go into stuff with friends, they let their guard down.
There is a HR issue that's come. I'm not even sure I can ask you this. I've got to address this message from Marion. It says, in Hemel. It says, Rob, blimey, I usually disagree with Jonathan, but I agree with him 100% about shop rents and rents all round. You've converted Marion.
Well,
it's not easy to do, by the way.
She's a very clever lady, evidently.
I can't believe you just. I've never had this situation. I'm looking at this HR issue. I'm thinking, can I ask you this?
Come on, throw it at us. Come on, Rob.
All right. It's a recent poll. Who wants to go first, by the way? Who wants to go first with the answer?
Depends what the question is.
No, take the risk. This is the gamble.
A politician's answer.
End of the programme. You've got to... Who wants to go first?
I'll go for it. Go on.
Right, okay. A recent poll suggests that 25% of men have had thoughts of a sexual nature involving a work colleague. How would you deal with that?
Yes. How would we deal with it? What, from a HR point of view? Or
Well, just, yes,
if I was the colleague that was being asked some obvious things, I would imagine so. Yeah,
I can tell you now in the BBC this never happens. Shut up, Matt.
Well, are you talking about just thoughts?
In the workplace
vocalising those
environment, 25% of men have had thoughts of a sexual nature.
Yeah, well, it depends whether they act on those thoughts, doesn't it? If it's just inside their head, then it's kind of harmless, isn't it? It's when people act on something when it's not warranted or when it's not it's not requested.
I think the other thing is we forget that work is no different than any other part of our lives, whether it's home, whether it's friends, social. I'm not saying it's a part of all men's thoughts and human nature.
Politically correct building. None of that stuff ever crosses anyone's mind in this building.
I'll tell you what would be interesting though. What's the female ratio of that?
I'm telling you. Jonathan Davis.
For myself, I would say that I do sometimes think like this of my fellow colleague who is my wife.
I second that. I second that. Yeah.
Good God, I'm so relieved. Gentlemen, thank you. You've been an absolutely amazing panel. Thank you to Jonathan Davis, Matt Gubber and Chris Beswick.
Travel news for beds, cards and bugs.
BBC Three Counties Radio.